Hey, everybody. First, I want to do a little temperature check on something that'll be kind of a recurring theme here. How many of you, I want to start on a real uplifting note, how many of you have suffered a sudden job loss in your career, in your life? Good. I'm good in the sense that we will all be on the same page. I feel sorry for those of you who've gone through it. If you have not, I hope you never have to experience it, but we're going to be talking about that a bit today. But now I'm going to tell you a story about one of my worst days at work ever, and I would just ask that you ignore the big spoiler alert I just gave you about how it ends. So this takes place in 2005. Picture yourself in scenic Grass Valley, Northern California, near Tahoe. It's quite lovely. And I was working as an editor at a newspaper, a community newspaper there, and I had achieved my dream. Believe it or not, every child has their weirdly niche dream, and I wanted to be a managing editor of a newspaper, as every young aspiring child wants to be. And no, seriously, it's like it had been my entire 4 years of college had been focused on working at the student newspaper, on being the managing editor and running publications. I absolutely loved it. And I had this wonderful opportunity just a few years after college to go pursue that in California. And man, I thought I was hot shit. My career was blowing up. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. I came out to work for a good friend of mine. We were an awesome team. And then one day I come into work on a Sunday, which is not the best, but Sunday shift. And I was like, it's all right. I go in, and there is a piece of paper on my chair. And it says, "You are being fired." Which surprised me because I had just been named Employee of the Month. And so I was like, these are mixed signals. What had happened, some of you who have gone through sudden career change may recognize a recurring pattern. I got a new boss. When you get a new boss, by the way, this is God's way of telling you to update your LinkedIn. I didn't have LinkedIn back in 2005, but I did my best. I tried to prepare, but I was not ready. I don't think you're ever ready, even if you see it coming. And I still had to work the Sunday shift, though, which is great. So I went home, and I sat down with my wife, and I told her we couldn't stay in California. You can't live off one income. You can barely live off two. And I realized I had failed her. I had failed myself. It's a horrible feeling. And again, that's why I hope those of you who have not gone through it, I hope you don't ever have to. We cried for like 2 minutes. And then we were both like, that's all they get. That's all the bastards can take. Like, they can take your job. They can take your livelihood. They cannot take your self-respect. They can't take your, the way you feel about yourself and your future, more importantly, right? So right away, immediately, 5 minutes after we sit down, we start talking about what are we going to do? What's our future? And not this like, oh no, the world's falling, and we're both just like, what's the plan? Let's do it. Let's do it right now. Let's make a plan. The problem was I was in newspapers, and for those of you who have not been following the media trends, it's not like hot career opportunities. So to find yourself abruptly terminated, in an industry that's not going well. Now, newspapers are not alone in this, right? Many of you have probably started out in a field that no longer exists, right? You can be an expert. Someone even mentioned this earlier today, that you could be an expert a year ago in Snapchat, and like everybody would want you in every meeting everywhere, right? And then a year goes by, and people are like, how are you on Instagram? And if you don't have those portable skills, if you don't have the unifying vision of what is it that you bring? And that's the crisis moment I was having. It's like, I am a newspaper editor in a world that no longer needs newspaper editors. And we moved cross country, moved in with family, did what a lot of people do. One of my favorite moments, just because you want little victories at this point. I walked into a Barnes & Noble and I filled out a job application and I put barista experience on the little notes part. And I got a phone call in the parking lot, and they were like, did you just fill out a job application? And I was like, yeah. And they said, did you write that you have barista experience? And I said, yes. And they said, can you start tomorrow morning? So it just goes to show, the world always needs good baristas. And I am telling you the God's honest truth that, like, getting that job made me feel so much better. Like, I never took it as a step down to go from managing a staff of 25 people to working nights at a coffee shop. I got free books, which was awesome. And I got respect, right? Like, people, they just treated at least that store, they treated me well, they treated the staff well. I had missed that, right? Like, months of having new management and being treated like, like you're halfway out the door already. And so that gave me a little victory, gave me a little boost. But I still had this huge career problem, right, that I'm not going to solve being a barista. And, the career heights of baristing are not tremendously high. So I was like, well, what about advertising, ad agencies? We had several in my town, but the problem is I knew nothing about advertising, right? And so my cover letter, my resume, everything is built around what a genius I am at newspaper editing. And I'm like, all right, well, this resume, I literally was just like tore it in half and said, okay, this cover letter is worthless now, because that's not what I'm going to be doing. So instead, I started over. I started from scratch, and just on a dumb whim, I was applying to this one ad agency, and they had like Little Debbie. You guys know Little Debbie, like snack cakes? Like, that was one of their big clients. I knew like a few of their clients. And so I wrote the entire cover letter as a memo to my boss written a year in the future. And I was like, dear boss, it's hard to believe that a year ago you hired a dude with blatantly no experience in advertising. And just how much ass have we kicked in this past year? I mean, just think about it. And I remember I put in there, I said something about, like, together we launched the unfortunately named Little Debbie Nutbuster. And when he brought me in for an interview, so at least I got the interview, and he brought me in and he said, you had me at Nutbuster. And I started over as a junior copywriter. And again, to go from feeling like you were at the apex of your early career, like I am crushing it, to being literally the lowest person in the entire org chart. But I was just so happy to be back in a company, to be somewhere where I had career potential. But I had to redefine who I was, right? And what are the skills I bring to it. And for advertising, I was very transparent about I don't know anything about advertising. But I didn't harp on that. Instead, I said, I know about storytelling. I know about long form. Turns out there is a desperate need for long form content, especially now. But even back then. And ad people are terrified of long form content. If it's like more than 6 words that rhyme, like, then they're just like, ooh. All right, Herman Melville, you take it from here. And I got very lucky, so this was like circa 2006, so then 2007 comes along, and the world is changed by MySpace. Let's all go back through history together. So I had this idea of, like, what if we made my title social media analyst, I think was my BS made-up title, but I just said, like, I think there's potential here, guys, and I think we can take this skill that the storytelling, this ability to communicate and to come up with content over the long term, which advertising had never done before. And they were like, all right, if you can get clients. And so got the clients. Fast forward a few years, it has become the social media department, then it's become the digital content department. I ended up working there for 8 years and went from junior copywriter to vice president of digital content in like a few years, because the whole time I just kept saying, we could be doing this, we could be doing more, and we can keep building this out, and it could be amazing. And, and of course, quietly positioning myself as the one to lead it, or not so quietly. It was just such an amazing experience, because nothing about my skill set, nothing about what makes me who I am professionally, none of that changed. I learned a hell of a lot. I think advertising actually made me a phenomenally better writer, because you start writing for people who aren't you. You quit being so self-indulgent and like Dave Eggers BS, like, and so it was it was a good experience, but I felt like I didn't change. I didn't have to restart my career. In the end, what I found out is that in advertising, they wanted people who had the skills that I had developed, and they didn't have those. They didn't want more advertising people. They're like, no, it's digital. We need new people. We need new skill sets. We need someone from outside. And then that has been the recurring theme for my career ever since. I started writing for AdWeek, I started as a commenter, again, to give you a sense of the dates, and this was considered a good thing to be a frequent commenter back then. And they loved it. They're like, oh, we love when your comments and the tips you send. And so they asked me to start writing for it. But it was just this curiosity about wanting to know more about marketing campaigns and cool ideas. And the site, kept blowing up. We started at 200,000 readers a month, and as you mentioned, we're up to about 6-7 million now. And so it's been a fascinating growth, but again, nothing's like changed. It's still just about recognizing that, if you have this passion, it is portable. Your skills and your passions and the things that make you who you are and that make your job worth doing, those can move to almost any industry. You can't let your job define you. You shouldn't let your career define you, but let's all be realistic. It often does, and that's fine. But what really defines you is what you bring to anything. And so the other day, I get, every once in a while, young people reach out to me and ask me to look at their cover letter or look at how they're applying for something. And you may recognize some of these bad trends that especially young people fall into, is that every cover letter is like, your company's so great, I would love to work there. It's so cool, you do such great things, and even though I'm fresh out of college, and even though I haven't worked in your field, and even though, 19 caveats, and 19 simpering kind of how great you are. I'm like, no, you go in, you tell them how great you are. You tell them about how much you can bring to it, because how many of you have hired people? How many of you have been hiring managers and brought people in, right? You want people with confidence. You don't want someone who's going to come in like you're doing them a favor. You want someone to come in and school you on, okay, here's how. You want them to start day one just crushing it and teaching you everything you haven't learned. If managers don't like that, they're bad managers. You don't want to work for them anyway. And so it's just the number one thing is just knowing what you bring to the table. And to that end, I think the big takeaway I want each of you, I know it's called How to Future-Proof Your Digital Career, and that's what I hope to talk about, for you to walk away with, but that's so unique to each of you. You each have very specific skill sets and very niche career paths that you've gone down. But what I want you to do to walk away from this presentation thinking about is, what is the bigger themes that make me who I am? It is possible to go too broad, right? You can't just have your LinkedIn bio be like, I am a thinker. I am a doer. Those are great. I like thinkers and doers, but in a certain kind of area, and so it is possible to be too vague, but more often people are too niche, right? I am an SEO engagement specialist. I am like this, and it's okay. Is that really what you are? Or are you something bigger that's defined by a passion that if that industry that you are in falls out from under you, if that job falls out from under you, do you want to just chase after more of what you were already doing? Or do you want to take those skills and bring it to something else? And the recurring theme of everywhere I've been and everyone we've hired as our team has grown has been that the best people come from outside. And they bring perspectives that change everything about how we do our jobs. Because we know how to, in our case, run a magazine and run a website. We know how to do what we're already doing. We don't know what we're not doing. And bringing in people with outside perspectives. Again, we used to only hire, okay, well, what magazines have you worked at? No, those aren't big enough. Come back when you've worked at enough big magazines. Now, I would love it if you've never worked at a magazine. I would love it if you've come out of a completely different sector. Those people we've hired have changed AdWeek for the better in so many ways, and it's something I cannot overstate the value of having an outside perspective. And yet all of us, including myself, feel like when you go into a scenario where you are the outsider, and it's hard not to think, oh, they're not going to care what I have to say, they're not going to like me. Can you tell I'm projecting a bit about being the only dude here? No. No, but it's so easy to take that outsider feeling and let it feel like you're alienated from everything that you're not going to be contributing. And the reality, right, is that you are going to be the most valuable person in the room. So we're going to do a little guided meditation. Kind of, not really. Just go with me on this. I want you each to close your eyes. This is going to be like my favorite part of yoga, where you take a deep breath and you push all the thoughts of work and careers and life, you push all those out of your mind, all that negativity, and push it out of your mind. We're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to take all that stressful garbage and we're going to focus all of our energy on it. Because what I want you to do is, with your eyes closed, first let's all take a nice cleansing breath, right? Like, get it all out. All right. Now let's focus on the garbage. I want you to think about the thing that is holding you back the most from pursuing the next big step of your career, from switching to another company, to switching to a new role, to making a jump that you've been wanting to make. Maybe it's moving to a new city. Maybe it's even just asking for a promotion or a raise. Or maybe it's just starting over completely, starting your own business. Whatever that is, think about what you want to do and think about what holds you up from that. And it's going to be different for all of us. Maybe it's that you're too young, or you're too old, or you're too loud, or you're too quiet. Maybe it's that what you've been doing doesn't feel like it matters anymore. Maybe you've taken 5 years off. You've been out of the world of that field. Maybe you've never done whatever you're thinking about doing. You haven't started a business before. Now, I want you to think about that. Like, these are insecurities, right? Like, these are the things that haunt us, the things that we hold ourselves back with. No one else is holding us back from at least trying. We're holding ourselves back. Now, I want you to shift the mental image a bit. I want you to think about your best friend coming to you with that exact same situation, right? They want to pursue a new job, a new opportunity. They want to make a big life change. And they tell you the exact thing holding them back that you think is holding you back right now. What would you tell them? Like, none of us are ever going to tell our best friend, like, yeah, you're right. You have peaked. What you would tell them, right, is what you need to tell yourself. And it is that what you think is a weakness is always your biggest strength. We just box ourselves in, and we don't give ourselves the freedom and we don't love ourselves enough sometimes to treat ourselves the way we would treat our best friends. And so that's the big thing I want you to walk away from with this is, think about that thing. And whenever because if it is the number one thing holding you back from moving your career forward to moving it into a different area, if it's the number one thing, then it's going to keep coming back up and you're going to keep thinking about it. And every time it comes up, I want you to think, no, that's not my worst part. That's my best part. That's what I bring to it. If I'm young, it means I bring a fresh perspective. It means I can help this company or whatever I'm doing appeal to a new generation, a new audience. If I'm older, that means I'm going to bring a level of experience. Like, here's one of my favorite stories. My mom worked on the Apollo program. My parents met building the Saturn V rocket, which is amazing. I'm super proud of both of them. And this is the 1960s, and then they figured out the rocket, and then we figured out the space shuttle, and then we did all this, and now Elon Musk is launching, cars into space and whatever. And what's funny is when the space flight resumed a few years ago, when private space flight started building rockets again, you know who they called? All the living engineers who worked on the Apollo program. Because in their memories, they knew more than any documentation could possibly have. So like my mom and a bunch of other people who are 65, 70, they get these phone calls being like, we need you. We need you more than anything, and you are such a rare commodity. So think about those things. Think about what that is, and think about it as a strength. Think about it as something you bring to any organization, and that makes you not only ready, but ready to kick ass at whatever you do, and be that generous with yourself. And that's my lesson for today. I hope it helps you, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful time.